All right, everyone. This is entry 11, talking about, I guess, space and spirituality here from my own personal perspective. For me, um, space flight is very, an exploration of outer space has always had a spiritual component. Um, and why I feel the magnitude of how large everything is out there and how tiny we are on Earth. On the one hand, I feel insignificant, but on the other hand, there's a great deal of wonder, the mysteries that's out there. And I think that's tied to how I feel internally about my soul, which, there's an internal space as well. Um, so recently reading parts of the chapters from the book Andromeda by the Soviet author, talk about there's a lot of spirituality there in terms of cosmism. I may not be saying it right, but the whole concept about how outer space is actually exploration of your inner soul as well, and how it relates to science. Um, so I figured today I will read a bit from The Dream of Spaceflight, one of my favorite books. I've had this book for quite some time now. Actually, first heard about this book, Dream of Spaceflight, by what's his name? Can't. Oh, well, it's really hard to see this because Wyn Wachhorst. Yeah. First heard about this book from my grad school advisor, Dr. David Highland. Back in the day, I saw this book laying on his office, like I think bookshelf, and I was curious about it. Since it said "The Dream of Spaceflight: Essays on the Near Edge of Infinity," and it did not seem like a technical textbook, and clearly it wasn't. The professor I had was a very literate and poetic man, and I could identify with that as well. So immediately intrigued, I went ahead and bought a copy, and I've had this for a good while now. I mean, there's coffee stains and highlight things everywhere. So typically, for anybody who is interested in space, this is a book and poetry or literature. I recommend this book, since it also touches upon the spiritual elements as well. So I just read a little bit from the Geography of the Soul. That's where it says, and this is on page 135. By the way, for anyone interested, I did put the Amazon link there, which you can purchase. It does seem to consistently be out of stock, so uh, if you frequent used bookstores, maybe you could find one as well that way. But the Geography of the Soul. In the long run, the whole politics of society is more profoundly changed by a new sense of human potential than by any amount of obsessive self maintenance. Where there is no vision, says the proverb of Solomon, the people perish. Without a source of meaning larger than the ego or beyond mere survival, one is left at the center of a universe devoid of transcendence. The significance of anything derives from its larger context, one dependent in turn on still greater perspectives, until we reach what sociologist Peter Berger called the sacred canopy, the boundary where known and unknown meet. This largest conceptual cosmos halts the infinite regression of why questions, closing the perceived order with such symbols as God or universe, just as mathematical order is preserved by capping the system with notions of zero and infinity. These ultimate constructs need not belong to organized religions, whose ossified idolatries are often inimical to larger meaning. Any living symbol of the boundary left inchoate and mysterious becomes the object of awe and wonder, veiling some great mystery of indeterminate size and origin. Wonder, in its larger sense, denotes the mysterium tremendum, the aura of unfathomable majesty, uttering humbling and holy other, surrounding the sublime and terrifying unknowns that border our models of reality. The dark forest, the empty desert, the sacred mountain, the boundless sea, the black silence of cosmic infinity. Thus, we gaze into the night sky and feel not diminishment, but dilation. We sense the vastness and passion of creation and glimpse the equally vast interior, the enormous geography of the soul, as journalist Edwin Dove put it. We are aware of the stars only because we have evolved a corresponding inner space. Thus, The depth to which we experience the cosmos is proportional to our level of self awareness, and with a capacity for self transcendence and connection to larger contexts of meaning and identity. The ego perceives its own finitudes, free of false self images, and able to see others as more than means to its own examined agenda. Like the astronaut looking back on an Earth without political boundaries, one sees the multifaceted surface and oceanic depth of the larger self. One reflects on reflecting, a boundless regress that projects a deeper interiority onto the outer world, which becomes a more profound field of wonder. At the opposite extreme of self transcendence is self assertion, inflated ego that subsumes the social context, much as a cancer cell proliferates to no purpose and metastasizes. Psychologist Abraham Maslow argues that the excessively self assertive are governed by such lower needs as security and acceptance, measuring others by their usefulness, mistaking wealth and power for ends in themselves. Spirituality is confined at best to conventional creeds, idolatries that avoid the larger questions. A false self projects its own system of categories and expectations onto the world, recognizing only those things that can be quickly labeled and filed away in some well worn category. Extremes of boredom are avoided by a rapid succession of stock perceptions, as with spectator sports or TV fare, where the elements are rearranged to affect suspense or surprise without deepening the experience. Thus, while everything seems familiar, little is really seen or known. Embedded in the protective cocoon of the culture, much as the infant is unable to distinguish between self and other, the unreflexive, self assertive person substitutes know how for know why, finding security in the familiar to the point of feeling adrift without a fixed pattern or routine. This condition can develop when an over anxious parent or repressive culture leads a child to distrust the world, instilling a feeling of impotence and fear of novelty that curbs exploratory play. Conversely, a child forced into independence too early may develop obsessions with power and mastery. At either extreme, the consequent fear of the unknown, of facing internal uncertainty, or losing external control can bring a compulsion toward order and predictability, and a reductionist dismissal of anything unrelated to the practical, empirical world as irrelevant nonsense. Symptoms that roughly describe the pathology of power oriented politicians who obstruct the exploration of space. Anxiety kills curiosity and the urge to explore, while the want of self-reflection strangles imagining while the want of self-reflection strangles imagination, creativity, poetry, and the sense of wonder. In contrast, the self transcendent personality is motivated by growth needs rather than deficiency needs, seeing experience as one would a sunset or a work of art, not as a means to unexamined ends, but as an end in itself. Fascinated by the frontiers of the familiar world, such people break through the cultural cocoon to the ineffable, inexhaustible other. They're directed not outward at what they lack, but inward toward expressing what is intrinsic to the organism. Maslow has argued that the meta needs for truth, goodness, beauty, order, and unity are biologically as basic as the lower needs, but remain obscured and elusive for those whose growth was arrested at earlier levels. In addition to the fulfillment of primary needs, however, self transcendence requires a reflexive capacity to see beyond the raw content of experience. In phenomenological study of introversion, psychologists Joe Shapiro and Irving Alexander distinguish between the quote unquote lived experience of the extrovert, which is direct and unmediated like a cropped photograph, and the quote unquote reflective experience of the introvert, which is more like a painting. In extreme form, the extrovert's self is simply equivalent to the path of his encounters as he moves through the world, whereas the introvert's self is an evolving inner construct in light of which raw experience is selectively interpreted and incorporated. This incessant and intensive creation of meaning can leave the introvert hypersensitive and susceptible to overload, while the extrovert is more stable and thus better armed for the arenas of wealth and power. The explicit meaning that results from the introvert's self reflection contrasts with the implicit, quote unquote, felt meanings of the extreme extrovert, who is bored by any experience that must be reflectively transformed to gain significance. Maybe that's why people don't read these days, right? You have to reflect to gain significance. Most of us, of course, lie near in the middle, but to the degree that we lack self awareness, we cannot think metaphorically and are thus condemned to the literal life. Arthur Koestler contrasts the quote unquote routine, which operates on a single linear plane, with a quote creative, which imaginatively associates two previously unconnected matrices of thought. The juxtaposition of matrices disarms unreflective self assertion as absorption in the car chase is displaced to the theater when the film slips out of focus, dislodging the subjective experience from its objective correlate and revealing the inner world as a separate reality. It is the essence of the metaphoric imagination, analogous to the dreamer's awareness of dreaming, what Blake called double vision, the ability to simultaneously perceive a thing in at least two ways. A recent study of 91 prominent creative people found that their personalities contain a complex balance of polar extremes: cooperation and aggression, realism and idealism, rebellion and tradition, masculine and feminine, a stereoscopic depth that retains a childlike delight in the strange and the unknown, a sense that anything mysterious, regardless of utility, is worthy of attention. Psychologist Heinz Kohut note that such people seem to preserve the child's capacity to experience reality with less of the buffering ego that protects the average adult from traumatization, but also from creativity and discovery. You know, I feel like that too, for sure. Like, I always have this childlike wonder, but I definitely feel a lot. And so it's easy for me to be, traumatized by something that other people may be like a friend of mine might say, like, oh, just get over it, just go feel better, go do more work, stop thinking about feelings or whatnot. But you know what? That people who talk like that about that, I don't know. I feel like a true creative has to be in touch with your feelings. And that's who I am. Okay, so side commentary. Um, the buffer seems to be rational consciousness itself. To the degree that we rely on deliberate conscious thinking, our analytic, reductionist, problem-solving mind, we lose access to the slower, less conscious ways of knowing that are the seed beds of creativity. A simple example is the fact that we often recall a name only when we cease deliberately trying. Cognitive scientists now suspect that the function of rational consciousness is simply to invent plausible rationales for decisions already made at preconscious levels, its evolutionary role being to analyze and evaluate those inclinations in threatening situations. In modern competitive society, however, the threats are more often to status or self-esteem. Pressured by such uncertainties and fearing that we will lose control or commit condemning errors, we revert to rigid, clear-cut, and conventional thinking, adopting one shallow nostrum, one fashionable idea after another. Okay, so this kind of goes on for a little while. As you can see, this author can get a little wordy, but it is it's something. It's definitely in times of creativity, wonder, being able to feel all that things. I guess let me just skipping a little bit more. So yeah, I think this part might be important. A sense of the cosmos. This is on page 146. So let me just read like one more paragraph here. The point of all these models is that they delineate a spectrum of self-awareness, a measure of wonder that divides the apostles from the opponents of space exploration. Without this reflexive awareness of the stars remain unremarkable, the night sky becomes peripheral. But the models find larger meaning in the fact that the psychic development of each individual reenacts the evolution of human consciousness. For the balancing of self-assertion and self-transcendence defines the contemporary coming of age, a cultural transformation for which the quintessential symbol is the dream of spaceflight. All right. And, that's really important. Like, the dream of spaceflight is basically saying that's like a self-transcendence sort of act. It makes sense. I mean, if I don't see my life in a larger context, if I look at the stars, I'm like, who cares? Look at the night sky. Who cares? I mean, we got so many problems on Earth. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that think that way. But for me, if I look at it, I just think, oh, wow, we're we're like a tiny little planet orbiting this tiny little star in this, I mean, sure, tiny little galaxy. If you look at the scope from the universe, in like hundreds of trillions of galaxies, if not more, and the universe is still expanding, and it's just like, it's just, I don't know, it puts me in awe, like how tiny and insignificant we are, and yet we are trying to comprehend the universe and trying to explore. I mean, in terms of my job, my day job, or sometimes I work at night too, so whatever. The one that pays me a good chunk of money, a decent chunk of money, like helping us put people on, put machines on the moon to explore that is, you know, there's a greater purpose here. And for me, there's a spiritual aspect to it for sure. In that humanity, we are created, and yet we're trying to explore, you know, we as creations, I feel like, are meant to understand this natural world, to be able to understand the universe that we live in. And there's a great deal of wonder and beauty that God has given us to appreciate. And science and physical exploration, going to other worlds, enable us to develop a greater understanding and appreciation of the beauty that is around us. And if we lose sight of like the true beauty that is, you know, this created universe, then what do we really have? Really, there's just emptiness. I mean, if all I think about is like money and how to live, in terms of like what the Maslow's hierarchy said, by which the base level is just survival, I don't know. There's no wonder there, really. It's just all I think about. Then it's like, oh, okay, how much more money can I get? What's my status? Like, are people looking up to me? How popular am I? But none of that, I don't know. To me, none of that really matters. What matters is the significance of at least this is me personally, the significance of the connection with God, and also the significance of helping humanity explore and understand more the beauty of God's creation, which is this universe. At least that's how I define core aspects of my purpose. You know, naturally, you know, I do care about, I don't know if I should say mundane things. Like, obviously, I love having good food to eat. I love to travel and explore different places. I love engaging with interesting people. But all of that, you know, to me, serves a larger purpose, really. And the true wonder is when I look up into space, and I feel such great, profound wonder inside. So yeah. And speaking of which, you know, I have written poetry myself. So let's see if I can. So I have written simple words and reckoning the space between words. I should probably put that link in Amazon. So you can actually just buy the book there. That would be great. If I'm going to be seriously promoting, if anything. But anyway, Dream of Spaceflight is a great book. If I was going to write some prose, I would probably write something like that. But yeah, like it's, I don't know, maybe. So there is, yeah. So this is actually a, I guess what do you call it? A poem that I think resonates pretty closely with the theme of what the Dream of Spaceflight was saying. I'll read it briefly. It's called Beyond Reality. Sometimes I fear that people do not see that beyond this physical world we call reality lies colorful dimensions of intense activity, dancing quarks, spinning matter, chaotic energy. Our senses falter confined to our locality. Far beyond understanding lies true reality. These worlds beyond our physical mortality, no general relativity, no Euclidean geometry, our meaning resonating questions through time eternal. Science from physics to biology answer only the external. For glimpses of truth lie within our spirit's internal, and the journey to know lies past our life-death terminal. So I think ultimately there are great mysteries in the world, in the universe, which we will never truly know until we die. I mean, and then we can see what is actually, maybe see a little fragment of the construct of the universe. I would hope so. I'm not saying that I'm going to go like do that prematurely, but this is my hope upon death, to be able to at least glimpse further into the understanding of how this world is, this whole universe, or multiverses, if you believe that, or multiple dimensions. But yeah, it's just like I'm always full of wonder. Like there's just so much to explore and understand. We know so little. Um, but yeah, that's my take on things. I'll put a link in there for this book, I suppose. So, anyways, um, all right. Well, it's about 2 o'clock in the morning here on December 23rd, 2024. Assuming you're watching this live, so I better get some rest. So. Oh, and this shirt, it's like a glow in the dark constellation shirt. I actually got it out near the observatory. I think it's what do you call it, McDonald Observatory, in like near Marfa, a little bit north of there. Um, Went early this year with someone very close to me, and it was yeah, it was a very dark skies out there, and I definitely felt connected to the universe just looking up there. And naturally, I had to get a souvenir, so this is where it's at. I think this is made by some company, some people in Haiti, so I have no idea who the actual designers are. So, but anyways, it's pretty. So everybody should have one glow, at least one glow in the dark constellation shirt. Recommendation.